Hello, my name is Just Snoopy, and this is Fortnite Save the World. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. I am a Fortnite Save the World player who has been playing for the past 7 years on and off, and I have seen this community at its highs and I've seen it at its lows, and I can clearly say that this is one of the highest highs that it could have ever been. So with Save the World now being free to play, I felt it was the perfect time for someone like me to make a tips and tricks video to share the knowledge that I have obtained through the 7-year journey of Fortnite Save the World, so that I can help new commanders and old commanders who are coming to help fight the oncoming storm and save the world. Finally, one more thing before we start talking about the tips and tricks is that a lot of these tips and tricks were recorded before free-to-play came out, so keep that in mind. However, most of them, if not all of them, should still work after free-to-play has come out. So now let's get into the video. The first tips I want to go over are the elements that the husk can be and what it means. Most husks will have no element, but the rest can be fire, water, or nature. This is important as depending on the element that they are, they will do more damage to specific structures and take less damage from certain weapons. Fire husks are weak to water weapons, heavily resist nature weapons, and also do 2 times damage to wood. Water husks are weak to nature weapons, heavily resist fire weapons, and do 2 times damage to brick. Nature husks are weak to fire weapons, heavily resist water weapons, and do 2 times damage to metal. If you want a simple explanation, just think water beats fire, fire beats nature, and nature beats water. And unless they are nature, just build out of metal. And if you really don't care about what element the husks are, or just want a weapon for general use, it is best to just go with energy, as it is effective against everything at a slight cost of damage. The next tip I'm going to share focuses on the mist monsters and mini bosses. Mist monsters and bosses cannot damage the objective themselves, however they do target the structures around it. The only exception to this is the flinger that throws up husks at the objective. The good thing is that each mist monster has a unique sound effect when they spawn and are about to attack. So when you hear them spawn, get ready for what comes next. Flingers and smashers are the most problematic mist monsters and should be on the priority kill list, so if you see or hear them, eliminate them immediately, as they can easily spiral out of control if there are more than 1 or 2 of them. For this next tip, I'm going to be talking about sploders. I accidentally killed this sploder right here instead of shooting his propane tank, but if you shoot a sploder's propane tank, they will automatically detonate and kill nearby husks. So if you see them in a crowded group, shoot them and you'll be able to kill an entire group. Or if you feel like it, you can even play ping pong with it and send it right back at them. Doing this can be both safer and more dangerous. Just make sure you don't accidentally send it at your own builds or a nearby friend. For this next tip, I'm going to talk about how to deal with certain enemies. The first enemy I'm going to talk about is the Nurse Husk. The Nurse Husk has a surprisingly large amount of HP, and it heals nearby enemies. That's about it. But if you don't kill it, it's going to get really obnoxious very quickly, and sometimes you can even get overwhelmed by the sheer amount of husks because you cannot kill them faster than they heal. The next enemy I'm going to talk about are Shielders. Shielders are tiny mist monsters that attach to any basic husk or mist monster, and in the lower levels they can be easily managed and you can out-damage their shields pretty easily. However, in the later parts of the game, these shielders can give so much shield to the husk that it is absurdly hard to kill them. Fortunately, the shielders themselves don't have much health. So if you kill the shielder, you'll be able to quickly then kill the husk that is protecting, or was protecting, I should say. Then we have Super Shielders. They are infinitely more obnoxious than regular shielders. As you can see, I'm using one of the strongest weapons in the game, a Ground Pounder that is supercharged to 144, which is the highest it can go as of free to play, and it was taking forever to destroy those shields. Fortunately, I have a weapon called the Old Smoky that can pierce those shields, which let me kill the shielders inside and even some of the husks. Apart from the Old Smoky, there are plenty other weapons that can also do this job, like the Maverick Shotgun from the base game and Thunderbolt, which is the same exact thing as the Old Smoky, but Old Smoky is slightly better because of crafting costs. And as I'm using the Old Smoky, you can clearly see that I'm able to easily dispatch of all of the Super Shielders and completely bypass their dome shields. Then we have the Riot Husks. The Riot Husks have a riot shield basically in front of them, make it so you can't kill them from the front as easily compared to the others. The best way to deal with them is to either shoot through their front hole in their shield, or by simply jumping around them and shooting them from a different angle, or hitting them in the back with a melee weapon. Finally, we have Bee Lobbers and Bee Husks. Bee Lobbers are different than normal lobbers as they throw beehives and typically only target the player. These beehives spawn bees around them and can be broken easily with one shot. Just like the beehives thrown by the lobbers, the beehives on the husks' heads of the bee husk can also be one shot. So if you feel like there's too many bees, just shoot their hive or the bee lobbers. This next enemy tip I'm going to talk about is about the mini-boss modifiers and the 3 most important mission modifiers. Unfortunately, the mini-boss I got had none of the modifiers I want to actually talk about, but showing this still allows me to show you how to see their modifiers. In the top left corner, you can see the mini-boss's health and modifiers. The ones you should look out for are Smokescreen, Ricochet, and Trap Vulnerable. These are important as it changes how you should kill them. Smokescreen is a modifier that makes it so enemies take little to no damage when shot at in the higher zones. To get around it, use a melee weapon, as otherwise you will be dealing so little damage that it would despawn well before you even took down even a measly 10% of its health. Next is Ricochet. This modifier will make it reflect all bullets back at you, including rocket launchers, so unless you enjoy literally shooting yourself in the foot or blowing yourself up, then use a melee weapon once again. Finally, we have trap vulnerable mini-bosses. They are extremely tanky and are practically unkillable except for the fact that they take astronomically more damage from any trap. Most on-level traps can kill a trap vulnerable mini-boss in only 1 to 4 hits. And if they don't have any of these 3 modifiers, then they are extremely easy to kill. Hence why I killed this one so fast. Now that I've shown you the mini-boss modifiers, I can now go over the mission modifiers that I was talking about before. The first one I'm going to talk about is Exploding Death Bomb. Exploding Death Bomb, whenever a Husky Husk, which is the larger husks, die, they drop a bomb on the floor that damages and destroys player-built structures. The best way to get around these death bombs is simply not staying near the enemy when they die, or in general, or by building ceiling traps such as ceiling electric fields or ceiling drop traps. Next is Smokescreen. I already described how to get around Smokescreen just a second ago, but I'm going to explain it again. Smokescreen makes it so enemies take negligible damage from any ranged weapons, including guns and rocket launchers, so switch to a melee weapon in order to deal full damage. Or you can also use abilities, which is something I didn't say about the mini-bosses one, but abilities do just as well against mini-bosses with Smokescreen. Finally, we have Metal Corrosion. Metal Corrosion is a big problem in the late game, as enemies get more health, hit harder, and sometimes a basic husk may make it through and hit the base every once in a while. However, it is still highly recommended to build out of metal unless it is a nature storm, like in this case. In that case, build out of brick. Another thing to note is that Metal Corrosion only applies to basic husks and husky husks, I believe. So, if a smasher or any mist monster gets through and starts hitting the base, it won't give it Metal Corrosion. For the next tip, it's a fairly simple one. Some missions will actively tell you what element is going to be appearing in that mission. When the game tells you this, it will only be that specific element, such as this one. As you can see, the husks that appear in this mission will all be fire. As for this other one, this one will only be nature. There are 4 classes in Fortnite Save the World. The first class I'm going to talk about is Constructor. Constructor is by far the strongest class in the game, not because of its offense, it is the weakest offensively, but instead it is the strongest defensively. The reason why it is the strongest defensively is because they have access to the ability Base. It is by far the strongest ability, and what it does is reinforces structures attached to the base and makes them take significantly less damage on top of the various other effects that constructors can give to the base, such as increasing building health, making these buildings auto-regen for health, letting them heal your teammates and yourself, and a lot more. Next are Outlanders. Outlanders are typically the fastest characters and are the best at crowd control, farming, and while they aren't the best damage-wise, they do have some strong builds that allow them to deal very high damage, such as Beetlejuice, or builds that focus on Teddy for crowd control. Next are Ninjas. Ninjas are the best at melee damage and can double jump to stay agile. Along with being the best for melee, they also get an ability called Shadow Stance. Shadow Stance allows them to stay in the fight after getting a melee kill by taking less damage and get bonus movement speed. On top of dealing good melee damage, they also have abilities like Dragon Slash that allows them to deal good crowd control. Finally, we have soldiers. Soldiers' entire kit are focused entirely on damage. They are typically the team's main damage source that aren't from traps. And while they are the highest damage generally, they are typically more focused on assault rifles, SMGs, and shotguns. It's good to try out all the hero classes as you play through the game to see which one you like the most. However, as you start selling into the middle of the game, it is good to start choosing which one you want to mainly play into. And once you get into the late game, you can start making builds as strong as possible. For the next tip, I'm going to explain the difference between commander and support perks. For this example, I'm going to use my soldier loadout. In my commander slot, I have Tactical Assault Sledgehammer in the lead, so I'm getting his commander perk. And then for my support slots, I have Fumble, Battle Beat, Quick Fingers, Assault Ammo Recovery, and First Assault as my support perks. In order to get the commander bonus, I would have to level up my hero in the commander slot up to a certain level to unlock their commander perk. In my case, I have already done this, so I am now gaining an extra 225% crit damage. Now if I were to back out and click on, for example, First Shot Rio, I'd be getting First Shot Rio's support perk as she is in my support team, which would mean for the first reload, the next 2 shots are guaranteed to crit. Another thing to note is that it does not matter what rarity the people in support are, as they will still provide the same bonus as if they were legendary or epic. The only bonuses that they would give is an increase in health and possibly power level. For this next tip, I'm going to be talking about team perks. A team perk is what completes a hero loadout. Most of the time is what allows your loadout to function to its fullest extent. In the early game, it is completely fine to completely ignore this, but as you enter the mid game, it's good to start looking into what team perks are good and how you should be obtaining them to start creating your builds. Want to be a walking tank that does a lot of melee damage? Try Blast from the Past. Want to have a near 100% crit chance and mow down your enemies with guns? Try Totally Rocking Out. Or would you rather try to cosplay as the Heavy from Team Fortress 2 and spam a minigun the entire time? Use Happy Holidays. The choice is yours, and keep in mind, this is before free-to-play comes out. For all we know, we could get another team perk that is something entirely different. The next tip I'm going to talk about is that some heroes actually can stop a Smasher charge using their own abilities. Heroes like Constructors, if they have Bull Rush, or Decoy, and Outlanders that have Shock Tower or Teddy can actually stop a Smasher charge if placed correctly. For this next tip, I'm going to cover about how you can actually obtain really strong heroes even in the early game. For example, right now I'm going to Stonewood, and right here you can see me finding Shrapnel Headhunter. Shrapnel Headhunter is a very strong shotgun soldier. In commander slot, she increases shotgun damage by 50%. While she's not the strongest in the lead compared to Buckshot Rapper, who you get later on in the game, via the collection book, she is a extremely strong hero, especially when combined with shotguns, which she specializes in. For this next tip, another good way to get schematics is actually from the collection book. You can access the collection book from the Armory tab. Here you'll be able to see all the heroes in the game, including from previous events and from the expansion. You're also able to research a set amount. You're also able to research some of them using a resource called Flux. Flux can be gained in a variety of ways. However, the most common way that people obtain it is via the event store, also known as the exchange. Here in the collection book, you'll also be able to obtain specific weapons that you want or specific heroes. A lot of these weapons are flexible, and if they aren't, they usually take a special voucher that you can obtain through ventures or various other means. Here's the exchange where you can buy all the flux. The exchange is also where you can buy event heroes and weekly items. So make sure you're checking the exchange store every so often to make sure you're not missing out on any strong heroes or weapons that appear. For the next tip, since I just covered the collection book, I might as well cover some of the good weapons in the collection book that you can get fairly easily from both regular missions or the collection book. First weapon I want to talk about is the Huskbuster. The Huskbuster is a shotgun from the expansion set that comes at a cheaper crafting cost and is a semi-auto shotgun that hits extremely hard and is capable of 1 to 3 shotting even the highest level enemies in the game. Next is the Stampede shotgun. The Stampede shares the exact same stats and perks as the Huskbuster, meaning that it is also capable of one-shotting the 1 to 3 shotting even the highest level enemies in the entire game. The only difference between them is that the Stampede cost is the same as typical other weapons, and is slightly easier to obtain from basic missions. These two shotguns can easily carry you all the way to late Twine Peaks if you invest into them properly. Next, we have the Siegebreaker. Siegebreaker is a classic SCAR, which we all know and love from Battle Royale, and it is basically just a general AR. While it may lack in single target damage, its general usage is able to take down basic husks and focus down mist monsters given enough time. Next is the Razorblade. The Razorblade is similar to the Siegebreaker, except for the fact that it is a burst weapon. It has a high fire rate, just like the SCAR, and it shares the same role as the Siegebreaker, being good at crowd control and is capable of focusing down a single target decently fast. These two weapons can also carry you all the way into the middle of Twine pretty easily. While not being the best weapons overall, they are fairly common and are very comfortable to use. Next, we have the Xenon Bow. The Xenon Bow used to be a community favorite, but it did get nerfed, and its projectile size is significantly smaller. However, its high damage and ability to pierce all targets, including even able to go through the ground and buildings, allows it to stay relevant even post-nerf, especially since it can pierce super shielders. Finally, we have the Vacuum Tube Bow. While the Vacuum Tube Bow is locked to nature, its 6 perk, allowing it to chain through multiple enemies back to back to back, allows it to have insane crowd control and still retain its high single target damage. As long as you aren't bringing this into fire zones, you will be able to dominate most of the battlefield, being able to clear massive amounts of hordes with just a single shot. While these two bows are the hardest to obtain generally from missions, they are still available in the collection book and will very easily last you all the way to the endgame in Twine Peaks. For these next few tips, they're going to be focusing mostly on defending objectives and traps. Probably one of the best tips is create funnels or trap tunnels. Creating these funnels will allow you to focus all the enemies down specific paths so that you aren't shooting in a massive crowd of enemies. Instead, you're shooting down a 1x1 tunnel or a 2x2 tunnel and just getting as much damage as possible in those tight areas. Another thing to note is that husks like to take the path of least resistance. If there is enough block off in an area, they would rather go around it. They would rather go around it instead of break it. However, if there is not enough block off, they will instead break it and go where you don't want them to. So make sure you're leaving enough areas open so that you can funnel them through, or create enough block off to make sure that they don't target an area that you don't want them to. For this next tip, I'm going to be talking about one of the most used traps in the entire game, and that is the broadside traps. Now, the broadside traps are shoot cannonballs that bounce around and can hit targets multiple times. And yet, for some reason, a lot of the community decides to put them facing towards a very open area where they will never bounce off. So that's why this is probably one of the most important tips. Cannonballs bounce. Put a wall in front of the broadside, so that way the cannonballs bounce back and hit the target again. Better yet, put two broadsides together so that they bounce off of each other and get a significantly higher amount of damage. Please let me stop having to say this. I see this happen so much. Please, just stop doing this. I don't want to see this again. For this next tip, I'm going to be talking about the ceiling electric field and the ceiling drop trap. The ceiling electric field can be placed 2 tiles high and have an AoE of 3x3 tiles. This allows it to hit a large group of enemies with just a single electric field. So you can just imagine how the entire ceiling of these will decimate an entire horde of weak enemies. Next, I'm going to be talking about the ceiling drop trap. Ceiling drop traps are probably one of the strongest traps in the entire game, as they not only provide really good damage, but they also are able to stall husks for an extremely large amount of time when combined with tar pits, floor freeze traps, and 1 floor spikes. Ceiling drop traps also can be placed 3 tiles high, allowing them to bounce the most amount of times. And on top of that, because both the ceiling electric field and ceiling drop trap are 2 tiles or higher, they are not able to be hit typically by exploding death bombs or sploders. However, do be aware that you do need a building connecting them to the floor step, as they will go down if they don't have a floor. And as you can see during this clip, it is harder for the slower enemies, like that nurse husk in the back, to actually get to me because it is getting constantly stalled by these ceiling drop traps. The next tip I'm going to be covering is about the flame growth trap. God, does this thing suck. To put it in comparison, I am using a 130 copy against nature, so it does 100% damage with its best possible perks. And then I am also powering it up with a constructor build that increases trap damage by over 30%. And as you can see, I'm luring this husky husk over, and it gets hit for, let's see how much, 209,000 damage. Now, I'm going to compare it to a 144 wall dart trap without that extreme damage bonus. And keep in mind, A 144 compared to a 130 is about 14% more damage. The Flame Grow Trap should be compared to it, is dealing about 15% more damage. Editor's note, it's actually the trap damage bonus is actually 42.5%, meaning the Flame Grow Trap was actually getting 36% more damage comparatively. So the first hit doesn't crit. Second hit, and it already does more. Now here's the bigger problem. This is an elemental husk. I'm using a physical trap against a elemental husk, meaning that this trap does 50% less damage. You can kind of see where I'm getting at here. So not only did the Flame Grow Trap do worse, it was also put in its best situation versus the wall darts, and on top of that, somehow still managed to do less damage. And even though I didn't show it, the Flame Grow Traps do affliction damage, meaning they do damage over time afterwards, and it still does less damage. The next two traps I'm going to cover are the Tar Pits and Sound Walls. Tar Pits can stop charging smashers in their tracks, and if you place them right in front of a building or right in front of the objective, it makes it so smashers don't charge through your base and wreck your walls, buying you precious time for your team to handle them with very little problems. Next are sound wall traps. Sound walls are typically used to make it so a husk doesn't target a certain building, or place at a beginning of a trap tunnel to make sure that sploders drop their propane tanks and they don't decide to detonate themselves inside a trap tunnel. Now on to the next tip. This next tip is about the wooden floor spikes and the floor freeze trap. They both fulfill the same role of slowing enemies down or stalling them inside your trap tunnels. Wooden floor spikes are cheaper to craft and deal damage, however they do not do nearly as well at stalling the husks. It's good to put these at the start of a trap tunnel, as the slow effect actually persists outside of their own trap for a few extra seconds. As you can see here, the husk sped up slightly after a few seconds. Now as for the floor freeze trap, it is significantly better at stalling at husks, as it stops them entirely in place and allows for your traps to deal extra damage in them as well. On top of that, if either the floor freeze trap or wooden floor spikes are combined with the ceiling drop trap, it makes it extremely unlikely that any husk is going to ever make it to the objective. Next, I'm going to be talking about how to use the environment to actually help you in your defenses. Right here, I've got a few wall launchers set up next to the edge of the map. Sometimes this will happen, other times it will just be a giant pit. Launching husks off the map will mean instant death for them. As for pit, sometimes if it's a pit they cannot get out of, they will automatically despawn. Other times, it will just be a very long walk all the way back to the start of the trap tunnel, where they'll end up going into a loop where they'll get sent back down to the pit. The next tip I'm going to focus on is floating atlases. And eventually when you start getting missions where there are multiple atlases at one time, sometimes you'll encounter one that is floating. Now floating atlases sound like they would be hard to defend, but in reality, they are actually the easiest thing to defend, as most enemies do not actually target them. The only exception to this are lobbers and flingers. So, once you build a structure like I have, where it's just a bunch of arches supporting it, just simply set up a anti-air trap at the very top and upgrade it to max level, and you should be fine for the entire defense. For this next tip, I'm going to be focusing on survivors and their survivor squads. The first thing you want to do is turn autofill off. Most of the time, autofill will actually make you weaker than stronger. Thankfully, understanding survivor squads is not very hard. For this example, we're going to be looking at the EMT squad. Right now, I have a mythic lead who is a doctor, along with the analytical personality. For the EMT squad, I know I want a doctor lead survivor because it has the same exact leader icon as the EMT squad. If you have no lead survivor that matches the squad, then simply put your highest rarity lead survivor. Now that we've talked about the lead survivor, now we can go into the basic survivors. For basic survivors, it's always better to put the highest rarity before worrying about the personality, as a higher rarity of the same level will always be better than a lower rarity survivor with the same personality as the lead survivor. Once you start maxing out your survivors in your survivor squads, start matching their personalities with the lead survivor. That way you can get the most out of them. And on top of that, if you can fulfill the bonuses that survivors each have, then that's a added benefit. However, right now, the only one that makes a real difference is the trap durability survivor. So if you ever have a legendary trap durability survivor, do not get rid of it. And try your best not to get too many squads of the same personality, otherwise you're going to be needing way too many survivors of the same personality, making it significantly harder to actually max them all out. Once you start having an abundance of heroes, it's a really good idea to start sending them out on expeditions. Expeditions let you send heroes you've leveled up out on missions by themselves, and they'll bring back specific loot that you assign. Sometimes it's survivors, sometimes it's loot, and sometimes it's just basic crafting materials, all of which is useful. It's also a really good way to obtain on-level loot without having to go farm it yourself. That way you can craft your own weapons, using the malachite you obtain from these expeditions, all of which you get passively. Now on to the next tip. I'm going to be talking about the llamas in the exchange. The llamas in the exchange in the X-ray tab refresh daily and show a variety of heroes and weapons that you can obtain at the cost of X-ray tickets. You can get X-ray tickets pretty easily every day by doing your dailies. As for event llamas in the loot tab, they are llamas that rotate during events. These llamas contain unique loot that can typically only be gotten via flux or from these loot llamas during this event, and you can reliably get these event tickets from doing mission alerts and the event missions. If you ever feel like you're running out of materials for crafting, building, or whatever you may need, simply switch to an Outlander and start up your highest level mission you can with no fill. This will make it so that only you load in and you have the entire map to yourself. Since you are an Outlander, you will be able to farm the entire mission a lot faster thanks to your anti-material charge and your increased pickaxe damage. I farmed for about 10 minutes, and this was my inventory before I started farming, and this is after. Keep in mind, I only focused on getting crafting materials. So realistically, you can get a lot more than I can because you could be focusing on something entirely different, just like building materials. The last tip I'm going to share is about storm chests. Storm chests are special chests that spawn on the outer sides of the map typically, and typically do not spawn in 4-player missions. They can spawn, but are unlikely to. Upon activating a storm chest, it spawns a large amount of husks and puts you on a timer. If you manage to kill 50 husks in that timer, an extra 2 mist monsters will spawn. After killing the 2 mist monsters, the storm chest will be completed, and you will get two gift boxes that give a very good reward. This includes weapons, traps, and even high-tier crafting materials. And if you don't like both the traps and the weapons, you can always recycle them for good materials. Another thing to note is that storm chests can also give loot to teammates. So it's a good idea to type SC on me and as long as that teammate gets at least 1 kill during the storm chest, they will get both gift boxes. So make sure you type SC on me to let your teammates know there's a storm chest and that they should go to you to get some loot. So we're finally at the end of the video. I just want to say thank you for watching the video. I put a lot of effort into this, and this is also my first ever video on Fortnite Save the World, and I hope to continue to make videos on this game that I've been playing for so long. You can let me know if you like this sort of thing by hitting the like and subscribe button, or leaving a comment down below and saying if any of these tips helped. As a final thought, I want to give a shout out to all the other YouTubers who helped me when I first started playing Save the World. Many of these tips I actually learned from their old videos and compiled them here for a more recent showing. While not all of them are still here playing Save the World and have moved on to other things, I hope that they can still be remembered as part of this community for their dedication to this game, and that the things that they taught all of us veterans still last to this day. These people include David Dean, Demon Joe TV, formerly known as Demon Joe France, Aiden Harris, Team Vash, and especially Archer, Beast, and A1 Get This Money, who have been here for the Save the World community even longer than I have, and have been through the roughest times and are still making content on Save the World. Once again, thank you for watching.